My name is Evan, and this is Coach's Take. In this episode, I have Miss Kristie K. Jones. She is a speaker, coach, consultant, sales leader, and a small business and founder led business advocate who has gone from the corporate space to now running her practice, and she's helping businesses grow beyond their plateau to scale their business at the highest growth. Kristie and I have connected in person. And then it wasn't until I went on her LinkedIn and I saw this headline, and this thing hit me like a ton of bricks. It said, "What got you to 1 million won't get you to 50." And I'm going to let that drop because there's a lot of people who are listening to this podcast that have their own businesses that are looking to grow. You're not on this podcast unless you want to grow, but are looking to take their business to the next level. And my guest today, Miss Kristie K. Jones, is going to help unlock growth for your business. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Miss Kristie K. Jones. How are you doing today?
Good, Evan. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I got a chance to meet you in person. It was one of those tug, kind of had to chase you down the hallway and tug on your shirt and say, "Hey, Miss Kristie, I need your help." And then you turned around and you said, "Hi," and then we sat and talked for like an hour, right? But I love that because you're passionate about what you do. And so, does that happen all the time? People tugging on your shirt, grabbing your attention like that?
Not always. No, not always. Felt like if it was that important, we should sit down and talk.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I appreciate that. Well, real quick, I appreciate you giving me some time on the show. We're going to talk about your business. We're going to talk about your path to where you are today. You are an author of a book. You have all kinds of sales heat that you're going to drop on the show today. But the thing about the show that I love the most is we're going to pay it forward. I'm going to ask you later on in the show to give a take on a coach, a mentor, someone who has enriched your life, someone who has, poured into you, and you can talk about what that meant to you and how you pay that forward. And so, you okay with naming them by name and giving me a take later on with the mentor or coach?
I am.
I love it. I love it. That's the beauty of Coach's Take because that takes on an energy of its own. So I'm going to jump in. Give me some background information. So you've done the corporate space. You've been
Yes.
in sales for 20 plus years. You've led teams. You're now leading organizations from a consultative level and from the coaching level.
Mhm.
How did you get into that space?
I lost my job. So I got reorged out. I was working for a B2B SaaS startup that ended up being a unicorn, first unicorn in their space. And I'd built their first SDR team. I was reporting up through
Mhm.
the sales channel. And about 18 months in, before that, I had realized that maybe our team should report up through marketing as opposed to sales. And so I started to kind of start those conversations. I started it with the CMO and said to him, like, hey, like, I think we need to spend more time with your team. And it feels like maybe we should be more aligned. The sales leader was out of San Francisco and he was busy
Mhm.
building the sales org out and trying to close deals. And so be careful what you ask for because they decided to put the SDR team under the marketing team, who happened to be in Phoenix, Arizona, not St. Louis, Missouri.
Mhm.
And so they disbanded my team and asked me if I would stay on for 3 months while they rebuilt it in Phoenix. And if they did that, they were going to pay me 3 months severance if I agreed to do that. So I said yes to that. Some of my team members were let go. Others that we were absorbed into other teams within the organization. Some into the marketing team. Some into sales engineering and customer success. So I went out to find my next sales leader job, and I say the universe conspired to change the path
Mhm.
that I had set out on. And a bunch of very interesting things were happening all simultaneously. And I sat down one night and kind of got quiet with myself and said, I think the universe is trying to tell me something. And I always
Mhm.
say that when the universe speaks, you should listen. And
Yes.
so I think all of the things that were happening were telling me that I should start my own consulting business. And so 10 years later, it'll be 10 years next month. 10 years later, here we are.
We're going to talk about that because I was in the same seat, and one of the things that really hit me across the head was what's next? I was trying to figure out what longevity looks like. And change, when you're with companies, there is a climate of change that's almost constant, right? And specifically in the business of sales, and we all have to adjust to it. But you get to a point where you start to see the value of what you do. And I'm pretty sure you were at that point building a quote unquote unicorn. So for all our listeners, I know what that means, right? We were chasing the unicorn, right? When you say unicorn, just for the listeners that don't
Mhm.
really understand that,
Sure.
what do you mean when you say unicorn?
Yeah, that's a Silicon Valley term, but it means that it's the first company in that space, meaning like they were a category creator. So it was customer success software. So in the customer success software space, the company I was working for was the first to get 1 billion in valuation. And so they call that the
Yep.
unicorn when you get to the $1 billion mark.
Unicorn.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the 101. I love that.
Yep.
We had that conversation about our startup, are we the unicorn? And it was we chased that. That's a nifty benchmark for your business.
Mhm.
But you got into the founder space, and so a little bit about what you do. You do help founder led companies or businesses that are in early stages. What attracted you to that's hard work.
It is hard
what
work.
what attracted you to that particular piece? Yes.
I think a couple things. I'd worked for some very early stage startups, and my parents had owned a real estate company growing up. So I think I was super attracted to the smaller environment that it brought, and the fact that I would have, I call it the seat at the Knights of the Round Table. So, I, like you said,
Mhm.
I had had my corporate life, and then I'd worked for some early stage startups, and I'd worked for some bootstrapped SaaS companies. But I really was looking
Mhm.
for a seat at the table. Like I really wanted to be had
Yep.
the seat at the table. The pace at which a startup runs like matches my personality very nicely. So like, every
Mhm.
day is sort of a new day. You're pivoting, you're changing, you're testing, you're trying out new pricing, you're getting new product features.
Yep.
And so the pace that it
Yep.
works at, and then startups tend to attract very smart people, right? Like I say that this is
Mhm.
not for everyone. Like you have to be competitive and resilient and smart. And so like I just liked the people that were attracted
Yep.
to starting startups. I think, again, I think that goes back to my childhood with my dad taking over the business from his brother, then my mom quitting her job as a teacher to become a real estate agent. And, there's like a very big
Yep.
risk profile there. I always say like, I say to
Yep.
employees, I said, hey, like nobody asked you to put your house up, right, as collateral for this, for this gig.
Right.
Like you got to have a lot of
Yeah.
respect for somebody who, puts their family's, finances on the line, puts their house up as collateral. And so like those are kind of my people, and I've got to think a special place in my heart for the small business person. And
Yep.
so I think that's what really, and I think on top of everything else, they need more help than almost any other stage,
Yes.
right? Because moving from founder led selling to building out your first sales team, like that's a big risk point.
Yep.
And, without
Mm.
doing that right, that can set you back months or a year, and you may never see Series
Yeah.
B funding, right? Or you may never see
Eternity.
Series A
Yes.
funding. And so I think it's such a
Yep.
critical juncture that, I had confidence because I'd done it that I wanted to be that person to help them make that leap.
Love that. So I talk about this in multiple episodes how there was a transition from my corporate management style, management skill set to then going to work for a startup business, how I didn't necessarily have those skills right away, but then when I got those skills, it's a different skill set. And
Hmm.
then you have to, so then when I got to my point to which, what do I want to do? I was thinking, okay, do I want to go back and use the skills that I learned in my corporate roles in the sales leadership, or do I want the exciting life of helping a company build from early stages? It's harder, but it's more exciting. And I think that's
Exactly.
I think that's our profile, right? Not everybody loves that, right? A little bit of chaos, a little bit of, a little bit of building, creating, coming up with stuff out of the
Mhm.
wazoo. I love that, but that's a profile, right? I mean,
Right.
for leaders who have the choice, this skill or that skill, but we pick the harder, not harder, but the more challenging.
Hmm.
What do you think about that profile for a leader?
Yeah, for sure. I think the interesting thing for me was, I had come from corporate and I'm a pretty black and white person. Like I'm very structured. And so the first startup that I came in, I did struggle a little bit, right? Because that I say the
Yes.
best person for a
Yep.
startup is someone who's more willow than oak. And I was pretty oak when I got there. But I think that's why I match so well with founders, because founders are very willow and I bring just enough
Mm,
oak, right? I mean, like they need to be moving
yes.
from willow to, newly planted oak, right? They need a little more
Hmm.
structure. And so, when I left corporate, the very first B2B SaaS company I worked for, the owner, I would say, like, I would say this all the time. I'm like, he would walk into my office in the morning and he would like spew this idea. And finally, I just called them shower ideas, right? And I'm like, so I would say, like, he would have to announce. I would like gave him rules. I'm like, if you've got a shower idea, you need to say it's a shower idea. Like, if it literally like formulated this morning from the time you got up to the time you walked into the office.
Yeah.
And then I said to him, and then if we say yes to it, then you can't come with another shower idea for 2 weeks, right? Like
Right.
we have to be able to like I'm an implementer of other people's ideas. This is what I figured out about
Yes.
myself. But I had to get comfortable with, like you said, I had to be a little bit willow, because you have to be
Yes.
like, again, the flexible, you have to be okay with change. Like it's, like you said, it's chaos sometimes, it's controlled chaos, and sometimes it's just chaos, right? So you have
Hmm.
to be good with that. And I think that's what gets us up every day. I think I was going to
Yep.
get bored pretty easily. I left
Yes.
corporate at 30. I think I was going to be bored pretty quickly with following the rules and being, although I am somewhat of a rules girl, I just didn't feel like like I was just one of those, I was just one of the minions in the room, right? And
Yep.
sure, I probably could
Yep.
have worked my way up the ladder there, but I still think I was always going to be someone's minion.
Yes, I got so much. We can actually get on this subject for a long time because there's so much that you said that we can unpack. But there is one piece that I do want to dive into, because this is, well, to transition to you being an entrepreneur, you being an author. We're gonna get into that. But there's two things that you had said that I agree with tremendously. I am a lot better entrepreneur than I am an entrepreneur. Like, I really, like, if I'd have got into business at the age of 25, like most entrepreneurs, and just stuck with it, man, I could have seen myself here, but I didn't. I love working for the founder because I work as a better entrepreneur. You dream it up. You dream,
Mhm.
you have these shower. I can't tell you the last shower moment I've had, right? I may not have even had one, right? But it's like, cool, you have shower moments. I love it. Bring them in. Let's vet them, right? And I can structure those concepts. I can actually turn those concepts into tangible pieces, processes, and systems. And those ideas now get drawn into, okay, next step, step by step. And people in that are dreamers, they skip to the end, right? They just go all the way in, and they don't look at the end of the steps. So that entrepreneur that you talked about, that's me too, right? That is me
Mhm.
too. So we're going to transition, because one of the reasons why I tugged on your shirt, Miss Kristie, is because you have a book. And I was like, you know what? If I was going to run into you, you were going to be in Indy. If I was going to run into you, I was like, I just want to ask her some questions about your book. And your book is called Sell Your Way In. And we talked a lot about the story that goes behind it. And I'm in the process of putting my book together. You gave me some amazing advice, probably advice that people would typically pay for, but you blessed me with that, and I appreciate you for that. I think we're besties now, right? Because of
Yes,
that.
yes,
It's like,
yes.
but you've got your book, and you talked about, um it was a journey, right? It was a journey. Sell your way in. Talk about the journey of getting this thing off the ground.
Yeah, I belong to an organization of female sales consultants across the country. The majority of us are working in the B2B SaaS space, but not everyone is doing that. And, I went to my first conference in 2019. We have an annual conference just like anybody else, but this is a membership organization called Women Sales Experts. And they had a breakout session on writing a book. And it was then, and there were about 50 people in the organization, and there was about that many in the room. And I realized that I was one of two people who hadn't written a book. And I was like, I was like, it wasn't even on my
Okay.
radar. Like, it really wasn't on my radar. And I was
Mm.
like, oh. And so I walked to lunch with one of the matriarchs, and she says, "What do you think?" And I said, "Like, you guys have all written books." And she's like, "Yeah." I was kind of like, and I was like, "Well," I go, "Well, I don't have a book." And she goes, "Well, do you want to write a book?" And I go, "Not really." And she goes, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I love what I'm doing, but I'd also like to do some speaking." She goes, "Oh, you're gonna have to write a book."
Yeah.
And I said,
Right.
"I don't think that's true." And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, when you fill out those forms and they like, you can't check the author box. She goes, "It's much
Yeah.
easier to get speaking engagements when you have a book."
Yeah.
And so I
Yes.
thought that was BS, and I told her so. I said, I got stuff to say, and I don't have to write a book to say. Like, I got important stuff to say. And she was like, okay. And then the pandemic hit, and I started off by writing an e-learning course for Udemy on sale. They were building out
Mm-hmm.
a sales catalog, and they reached out to me during the pandemic and said, will you write a course? And we did it on prospecting. And then I was like, okay, well, got all this material, so I was going to turn around and take that material and write a book on prospecting. And
Mm-hmm.
about a month in, I was so bored. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this is so dry. This is so boring. And I was like, and then I couldn't figure out why, like I have a journalism degree. I actually love to write, but I was not enjoying it at all. So like I took a 30-day break and I realized I was like, there's so much information out there and so many people out there who could do that better than I could do it. I decided at first and foremost, like I didn't want to write a how-to book. I'm like, I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
write a how-to book. And so I was like, well, what do I want to do? And one of the things I had been seeing over the years was so many salespeople struggling or quitting because what I finally determined was I did this really well when I was a sales leader, but it was like, what seat on the bus should you be on? Right? Like I grew up with the book Good to Great. So like, should you be on the
Mm-hmm.
bus? And in most cases, people should be on the bus, but a lot of people are in the wrong seat on the bus, right? And if they got on the right seat, like, the subtitle of the book is, setting your, the playbook for setting your income and owning your life. But people were
Yeah.
struggling. And I'm like, you're in the wrong sales seat. Right. And so I decided to write a book to help people. I mean, as I mentioned, I grew up in a real estate environment. So my mother went from being a high school English teacher to 100% commission sales rep overnight. Right.
Wow.
Like that was her first
Wow.
job. She was an underpaid English school teacher for, for a public school district. And then she was making no money basically, right? And so I'm like, that's not for everybody, right? 100% commission is not for
Yeah.
everybody, but I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people like, I say people call me all the time because like you said, I'm a giver backer. So I have 30 minutes for everyone I say. And people take me up on this all the time. Like I've been saying this for so many years that people are
Mm-hmm.
like, you should talk to Kristie. She'll talk to you. And I do. And then, but people like my friends will call me and be like, hey, can you talk to my son? Like he wants to be in sales. And I go, okay, great. What kind of sales? And then there's this silence. Like people just think it's sales. And you and I know that that is not
Yeah.
the case.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah,
Exactly.
it became a labor of love. It was definitely the labor part, which I told you about privately, which said like, this is definitely not for the faint of heart. But like nothing gives me more joy than like opening up LinkedIn and seeing a message from somebody who's just is in the middle of reading my book or read my book and said like, I completely changed the job I had. Like I stopped looking for a hunter
Yep.
job and I decided I wanted to be a, customer success manager or an implementation
Yep.
specialist or something else.
Yep. Yep. No, and so I was inspired by your story. I absolutely love that. And shout out to you, getting your book out there, sell your way in. Shout out to the women in sales experts. That's
Yeah,
what
women
that what it
sales
is.
experts. Yep, for pushing
Women,
me.
shout out to that. When and I tell people all the time, if you show up, and sometimes you'll get the message that you need to hear. That's we talked about the universe. Like
Hmm.
there's a reason why you were in that room and you
That's
got that
right.
message.
That's
Um,
right.
but but you talk a lot about being at the dinner table with your family,
Hmm.
and you were in the middle of sales huddle, or you're in this sales conversation that my son, like my youngest son, he says things like, you say I ask better questions than an SDR. He has no idea what an SDR is. But he goes, you say I ask better questions than an SDR. Like my kids are living in this sales
That's right.
world, right? So you at your dinner table with your parents, your mom, shout out to your mom for taking a commission only job, right?
Right.
That's shout out to mom, right? But
Yeah,
talk about
I
your
didn't know
family a
what a
little bit,
risk
how
that was.
that,
I should
yeah,
have been terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, what is she thinking? I said, Dad, what are you letting her do? Like, of course, she wasn't making any money anyway.
yeah,
She was a teacher.
yeah, yeah. But talk about that experience at the dinner table.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's one of the other reasons I wrote the book because there's a lot of Christiisms and principles in there that I learned at a very early age. My brother and I sat at the dinner table every night. Despite the fact that my parents worked in the same office, they never saw each other during the day, right? Mom's out doing listings and showing buyers, and
Hmm.
dad's the owner broker. And so he's, literally in the office and she's never in the office. And so every day was like at dinner table was sort of the time that we all came together and they got to debrief, everybody got to
Mm-hmm.
debrief your day, but that also included them
Yeah.
debriefing their day with us
Right.
present. So, they would start with what,
Mm-hmm.
how was school today, but then we would work into all these other things. And then I didn't really realize until I got a little bit older, but I say in the book that I got my MBA at the kitchen table because our parents never talked down to us. Like we knew what mom was making. We knew all the commission checks. We knew what when she listed a house, we knew what it was worth.
Mm-hmm.
We knew about the people coming in, the out of town buyers. Dad would take calls all night long
Mm-hmm.
from other, if a real estate agent was having a problem with the contract and it was 8 o'clock at night and it didn't matter what day of the week it was, dad got the phone call and then you're overhearing him on the phone. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's always in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, like you fast forward all those years. I mean, I did my corporate stint in retail, for 8 years out of college, but then went into, went into business and then started my own business. My brother went into business from the get-go. And he's been an individual contributor his whole life. And I've been a leader my whole life. So my brother took after my mom and I took after my dad, but it's no surprise that we both ended up where we ended up.
I love that. I love that. Um, so we have to talk about this headline that, and then we're gonna get into the take here. For this headline, what got you to 1 million won't get you to 50 million. Share some insight on that.
Yeah, I think the simpler version of that I used to say was like, what got you here won't get you there, right? And that's sort of like
Won't
whatever it
get you
is, whether
there.
it's 1 to 5 or 1 to 15 or 1 to 2, like whatever you were doing to get to this place that you were at, and you have aspirations, like you said, this podcast is all about people who want to grow, and if you've got aspirations to grow, you're going to have to make changes, right? Because what got
Mm-hmm.
you here will only get you so far, whether that be because you're going to have to, your personal and professional growth is going to have to be continuous, or AI comes into the world that didn't exist before, or some sort of outside environmental, or worldly, situation comes into play. So for those who are growth minded, and I call it lifelong learning, for those who are lifelong learners and are open to change, the willow part, right?
Yep.
But I think like, a lot of times I say to early stage startups, like they're risk takers by nature, right? Founders who do this are risk takers by nature. They're profiled that way, but they also are very loyal people. And so a lot of times what got
Mm.
you here won't get you there means that the people that got you to 1 million are probably not the same team that's going to get you to the next level, right? And so I think those are some hard decisions that need to be made is about when I come in, which is, hey, this person isn't capable of that. Like they've taken their skill set as far as they can take it. And so we're going to have to bring someone in above them or to coach them or those type of things, because the people that'll say yes, to a very early stage when the money is not secure and you maybe don't have Series A funding, are different than people who will say yes when you have 3.5 years of runway because you got Series A funding.
Mhm.
And so, I think like if you've been through a startup before, like I look for a lot of the people that I hire as sales reps number 1 or 2 for a company. I will only look for people who've done this before, even if they've done it one other time,
Right.
right? They know there's not a 3 ring binder, right? They know
Yep.
there are not
Yep.
SOPs for everything. They know that pricing
Hmm.
may change and they've got a high risk profile. So, I think the challenge that founders have is they're very loyal because a lot of those people took, equity instead of, income, or they took a lower base
Yep.
salary, like people, the developers like just wanted some equity or whatever. And so there's a big loyalty to that. But those may not be the
Yep.
same people. Like just like your processes are going to have to improve, your prospecting is going to have to improve, your marketing is going to have to improve, everything, right, has to improve, your
Yep.
product has to
Yep.
improve.
Yep. No, I love that. And that's, you're speaking to a lot of people who are out there who you know, just haven't figured out how to outsource the expertise.
That's
And
right.
that's a whole nother episode. How do you start the process of outsourcing your expertise? And so I know you've got some insight on that. And please give Kristie a ring, ping her on LinkedIn if you really want to understand. Like I said, she's going to give you 30 minutes. You're at
That's
least going
right.
to get
That's right. I
that.
already told you. Oh, that's right.
So let's switch gears a little bit. What I love about Coach's Take is we actually get to bring in someone into this meeting that means something to us outside of our parents, outside of people we work with, but a coach or a mentor, someone who you know gave you that 30 minutes and spent some time and helped crafted what you do. So do me a favor, give me a take on a coach or mentor who's built into you. And Kristie, tell me how you pay that forward today. Go ahead and give me your take.
Hmm. I'm going to go all the way back because this is Coach's Corner. I played competitive racquetball growing up. Started when I was an early in high school and played through college. Played after that, but I played in college as well. And I had a private coach. His name is Pete Rohala. And Pete was living in Topeka when I grew up. He worked for Payless Shoe Stores, which doesn't exist anymore, but he was an executive at Payless Shoe Stores. But he was also the Michigan State racquetball champion. And so he was
Okay.
teaching
Okay.
at night when he wasn't doing his executive job. He was teaching racquetball at the local racket club. And so Pete was with me for several years. And like Pete mentored me in a lot of different ways. I think, I was a feisty teenager, so there was part of that, like, the butting heads with your parents kind of thing. But I think the one thing that he brought to the table that I think at some point another coach might have, but he was the guy, was the concept of visualization, and how important the
Mm,
mental side of the game was. And I remember working on a shot, and we would use, like, racquetball cans only had two balls in them, so they were really short. And then we used to like put them at the front wall, so as a target, right? And they're pretty small. And one day we were doing that, and I was having some trouble with a shot. And he said, "Okay," he's like, "Go out and get a bandana." I used to keep bandanas on my racket bag, and this was the '80s, in the '80s. And so he goes, "Go get a bandana," and I brought it in, and he put it over my eyes. He blindfolded me. And I'm like, "What are we doing?" And he goes, "Just stay with me." And then he went and got a trash can from the hallway. And he brought the trash can out. And he says, "Okay, peek under the blindfold and see where the trash can is." And I said, "Okay." And then he says, "Now put your
mm,
blindfold back on." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Put the ball in the trash can." And I said, "What?" I go, "Well, I can't even, like, how am I gonna?" He goes, "Yep, muscle memory will kick in. Put the ball in the trash can." And then I did.
mm-hmm.
Not maybe the first time, but I did. And then we did it a few times, and you could hear it hit. And then he said, "Okay." And he took the trash can away, and then he put the little can at the front wall and said, "Okay, now hit the can." And I'm like, "Seriously?" And so it took me about three times. And then when the cans didn't have the balls in them with the rubber lid, they would explode when you hit them. And then I hit the can and it exploded, and I ripped the bandana
Mm,
off. And I looked at him, and he wasn't surprised. He was smiling, but I was had this like
mm.
holy shit look on my face. And he goes, "See the ball, hit the ball. See the ball, hit the ball." And he goes,
Yes.
right. And I mean,
Yes.
and so like I spend a lot of time, visualizing everything from, beach vacations to, and it's positive self. He taught me positive self talk. I play
Mm-hmm.
tennis competitively now. And so when, I
Mm-hmm.
get on the court and I immediately say, like, I continuously, the word that runs through my head the entire match is, "You're the winner. You're the winner.
Yes.
You're the winner." Not a winner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the winner of this
The
match.
winner.
Yep. I close my eyes. I see myself shaking the hands with my opponent at the end of the match as the winner.
Yep.
And I
Yes.
think like the mental side of everything, and particularly the mental side of sales, sales is such a high rejection sport that if you don't have your mental game together,
Mm.
it's never going to come together. So shout out to
Yep.
Pete.
Coach Pete. So shout out to Coach Pete. You are a competitive racquetball player and tennis player. Do you do pickleball?
I got a paddle. I only a couple times. I'm still
Pickleball?
trying to work out
Okay.
some of the rules because I want to charge the net.
Yeah. I love it. Um, Pete, and Pete clearly, there's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it's with
That's
through
right.
Tim Galloway, and
Yep,
that's a
read that.
huge,
Hmm.
that's a huge turning point for how I coach, right? And I actually had some diagrams written on a whiteboard with one of my sales teams probably 15 years ago. So shout out to Pete. He's sharing with you the stuff, and we share a lot in common, Kristie. The mental side of things has been the difference maker, not just in business and sales, but it's been in my life, being able to see who I'm going to be and then just work that timeline. And I think with sales, if people understood how strong that timeline is from rejection to deal, and they would have faith in that, they would be more successful. And visualization, I'm telling you, you hit the nail on the head. You just inspired me. You say things, Kristie, that connect with me a lot, and so this little time we spend together has been extremely valuable, and I know you have a ton of wisdom to give, and so hopefully we can spend more time. But I'm gonna let you take us away. I'm gonna let you take us away because we're at the end of the show. Is there any other words of wisdom, Kristie, you want to bless this audience with today?
You know what? I think the importance of calling out the coach, so to speak. Everyone needs people like this in their life, and I think like for different reasons, right? So I say, outsource jobs to different people, right? So like there's always that person you call that certain person for a certain thing, but you call somebody else for something different. Like make sure like there's no one person in your life, despite that being maybe your spouse, or your partner or whomever. Like they can't be everything that you need. So figure
Hmm.
out what you need and who can provide that for you. Because again, like without the team, like you and I came from, even though I played an individual sport for a long time, I also grew up playing softball. And so, I
Mm.
understand, like I say, like your circle matters. So the people
Yes.
that you bring into your life will, make or break you, right? Like, and I mean every corner of your life, personally and professionally. Like, if they're not on your team, then assume they're on the opposing team.
Hmm. I love it. I love it. Listen, somebody says if you're not with us and you're against us, that's a hey, that is a phrase that people use. I kind of teeter on the side of, not everybody's my enemy. But I will tell you, you hit the nail on the head. You show me your surroundings, I'll show you your future.
Right.
Kristie, I appreciate you coming on the show. It's always a great time spending time with you. And folks, I hope you got a lot out of the show today. But I'm going to go ahead and depart here. Kristie, it was always a pleasure. This
Thank
is a
you.
wrap with Coach's Take. Absolutely.